Go ahead and start her up, David.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to 2021, if you haven't already been welcomed. The beginning of our new year, and just about 3/4 done this program of reading installments of the book Offbeat Collaborating with Kerouac. My name is David Amram, promising young composer, and I'm delighted to be here. We have a very special guest whose work will be honored, which it always has been ever since any of us who knew her were lucky enough to be aware of her work. And over the last 60 years since I've known her, she is still continuing to do extraordinary things and has written over 26 books. And we're going to hear a little bit of what she wrote and see some wonderful videos from her. She was unable to make it tonight. I was speaking about Hetty Jones, one of our great writers, poets, thinkers, doers, and someone who is included in that branding term, the Beat generation. But like most of us who try to achieve anything, she was much more than that and doesn't define herself that way. They say, Jack used to say, Kerouac used to say, by your works ye shall be known. And certainly Hetty Jones' work is all she needs to be known because it's here and built to last and just terrific. So Hetty's in New York, where it's a terrible thunderstorm and all kinds of calamities, but we send her our love. And Hetty, this whole program is for you and your two wonderful daughters and all of your family, and hope that we can get together and do something soon. Our special guest, whom you see on the screen, Mr. Norton Wisdom, wonderful painter and artist, will be doing spontaneous drawings and paintings during the entire program, as he's done since the beginning. Our special weekly guest, Mr. Jim Canary, will be speaking not only about his work as the conservator of the scroll, which was Jack Kerouac's extraordinary first and final draft of the last version of On the Road, after he had already written 10 versions before that. And Jim has taken that all around the world, and he was on tour with our producer, Pamela Dickerson, and they were both on tour together with the terrific French intellectual and scholar and writer, Francois Mirabdi, who is going to read Piece by Rimbaud and also tell us about the experiences that he had relating Jack, Rimbaud, and Hetty Jones and Allen Ginsberg together. So I'm going to continue with the book as we did last week. We ended describing the end of the concert that I gave at a cantata that I wrote, which Langston Hughes wrote the text for, called Let Us Remember, which was commissioned by the United Hebrew Congregations of America. And Neil Cassidy, Gregory Corso, Allen Ginsberg, the great jazz pianist Freddie Redd, and several other, Gary Goodrow, the amazing improviser, actor, comedian, writer, and saxophone player, all were in San Francisco. We magically bumped into one another, and they came to the concert. So at the very end of the concert, Gary Goodrow came up to Edward G. Robinson, and I'll just read that part again.
Davey, what page are you on, love? I'm so sorry. What page are you on for all of us?
I'm on page 145.
Thank you, dear.
Take two. Mr. Robinson, Gary intoned in a perfect Irish brogue. I demand equal time. Edward G. Robinson broke into his famous Little Caesar snarl and hunched over, instantly recapturing his immortal screen performances as the legendary gangsters of the 1950s and 1930s. Very funny, he crowed in the bone-chilling voice we all grew up hearing of Hollywood's most feared fictitious gangster. Robinson turned on his heel, still in character, and walked out the stage door to greet his fans. Everyone backstage applauded. After the concert, we went to Enrico's in San Francisco to celebrate, and Herb Gold held court with his wit. Everybody was talking to anybody who walked by. Neil Cassidy came over to say goodbye. Tell Jack to take care of his health. He needs to find himself a good woman and hold on to her. We're getting old, Dave. It was great to hear your piece. I could hear Bird and Berlioz and Bach. And most of all, you yourself. I'm going to try to do some more writing. Take care of Mary. She's a fine young lady, and I see she digs you. Oh, I wish she lived back east, I said. Take her with you, said Neil. Drive her there, or stay here. It's not like New York. Tell Jack I think about him. I will, Neil, I said. He always talks about you. Tell him to cut back on the booze. I'll try, I said. David, said Herb later on in the evening, when everyone had wandered off, you have a new fan base. 1,000 rabbis can't be wrong. Don't forget me, said Mary. I'm not David's rabbi. I'm his rabbet. I never did forget Mary. I had to go back to New York, and we talked on the phone, and I tried to see if I could get work in the Bay Area. I was ready to go back out anyway. I had dreams about her. 3 weeks later, she wrote and told me she decided to grow up and was getting married to a doctor she went to school with. I called up Jack. How did it go? Said Jack. It was incredible, I said. Everybody asked for you. Neil sends his love. So do Alan and Gregory and hundreds of others whose names I can't even remember. And let me read you this review from the Oakland Tribune. Langston was thrilled, and I'll read just the last part. The enthusiastic reception called out on the stage the 35-year-old Amram, who seemed overwhelmed by the enormous impact of this colorful yet forceful melodic work as anyone. This is a very listenable piece with a universal theme and a musical integrity that nowhere sacrifices the vocal theme for orchestral effect. It performs what Casals, El Pasebre, and Mio's Pacem in Terris set out to do, with considerably greater success, musically speaking. When I finished the review, Jack said, That's great, Davy. Send Langston my congratulations. Now we have to get them to play A Year in Our Land that we wrote together out there. Imagine hearing my section of the cantata, the excerpts from The Lonesome Traveler, where I wrote about being up in my shack in the mountains out west. Imagine that being played at the San Francisco Opera House. How's the fabulous Miss Mary? She went on to greener pastures, I said. She's marrying a doctor who keeps regular hours. She was so fantastic, I think about her every day. She was truly lovely in every way. Don't despair, Davy. There are oceans filled with fish and forests full of trees. Remember what my mother told you, Davy. There's a lot of single women out there. Just don't marry a tramp. I should have married her right away, I said. You can marry her later, said Jack. She'll get bored with the doctor. He'll always be home on time for dinner, but he won't take her on those flights of the spirit to the ever-unfolding series of rooms in paradise and then play her mournful ditties from the previous world on his piccolo. We'll both find ourselves fine wives unless they find us first. Down here in St. Petersburg, all the good gals are taken. It's a good thing for my mother's health being down here in St. Petersburg. But there's no culture. There's no romance. I had a wild time in Lowell. I never got to see your piece on TV. I was out drinking. Send me an acetate or a tape. I want to hear how you set Langston's words. Maybe we could write a Jewish Catholic choral piece to create new texts using music and old prayers. We'll do more, Davy. Our best days are yet to come. I'm tired, but I'm still strong. I'm a writer. I always will be. An artist must burn. Say it with me, brother. And we both intone together with a hard and gem-like flame. In 1966, I was chosen by Leonard Bernstein to become New York Philharmonic's first ever composer in residence, and suddenly I was part of the music establishment. I met composers, conductors, soloists, and musicians from all over the world. I was interviewed almost daily and was the subject of a 3-page feature story in Life magazine when I reiterated the philosophy that Jack and I shared, put into practice of celebrating spontaneity and formality, and a love of all the beauty that our society ignores, overlooks, or discards. Many at the Philharmonic thought I was somewhat deranged. Leonard Bernstein, however, loved it. You were speaking from your heart and spreading the very important message. I try to do the same thing, and the critics try to annihilate me. Jack and I would see each other whenever he came to New York. We still had a good time together, although he became increasingly saddened by many of his old friends who now seemed to have abandoned him when he needed them the most. In the 1960s fall, I was pleased to hear that members of the Houston Symphony were going to have a special concert of my symphonic music where I would conduct my own works, including Year in Our Land, with the text by Kerouac, and also have my jazz quartet perform independently during the course of the evening. I would be the composer, conductor, and performer of my own jazz ensemble. Nothing like that had ever been done before, but thanks to Andre Previn, who could do the same thing so brilliantly himself, I was given the opportunity to fulfill a dream that Jack and I always talked about. Formality and spontaneity were appearing hand in hand in Texas, and I was at the helm. When I got to Houston to start rehearsing all my music, which included the cantata A Year in Our Land, I saw my old friend from the Seventh Army Symphony, James Tankersley. James had helped recruit members of the Houston Symphony, where he was first horn, and found a great chorus from Southern Methodist University, prepared by Ruth Rowell Rollins to sing the cantata. There were also 4 excellent soloists. The Houston Symphony was a full-time ensemble where each player in their respective sections of the orchestra played together year in and year out. Since the cantata was structured to feature each section of the orchestra in each of the 4 principal musics, the difference in the playing was the difference of the infield, the outfield, the pitcher, and the catcher of a Major League Baseball team, all having a great built-in respect as opposed to a pickup game where teams just thrown together. The freelance orchestra that had played the New York premiere was terrific, but they only had one rehearsal, and some of the players had never even met one another, much less played together. The wind players from the Houston Symphony, who had their music in advance, tore it up. I wish Jack were here to hear this, I said to Margot Pace, who had organized the concert. I wish he were here too, I said. I love his books. He has such a big following in Texas. He writes from the heart. You can feel him talking to you. He's not showing off in his writing. He's talking to you, said Margot. Did he really sit on top of that mountain for a month? Asked James Tankersley. Didn't he miss drinking wine and seeing women? Jack loved those solitary moments, I said, and he loved the idea of meditation, reflective hours spent alone to offset the wild times. It was only after On the Road came out that he felt trapped by having to act like Neil acted for so many years. All that wore him out. He told me how hard it was when he went to Lawrence Ferlinghetti's cabin to cool out by himself in Big Sur, but still how much he wanted to recapture that feeling he had when he was lying in his bunk on a merchant ship, reading and writing, out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He felt he could have been a monk or a priest in another lifetime. One of the members of the drama or chorus came up to me after the rehearsal. Mr. Amram, you said you knew Jack Kerouac. Is he still around writing anything? You ever hear from him? Seems he kind of disappeared on us. He's still with us, I said. He just wrote Vanity of Douloise, all about his early life. It's a beautiful book. He read me parts of it on the phone. It shows where he came from and what he was about the Lowell and his family and his struggles to find himself and follow his dreams, the Lowell in which he grew up. I thought he was the leader of a beatnik movement, said the young man, frowning and looking uncomfortable. That has nothing to do with him except to help ruin his life, I said. He is, was, and always will be a writer. He would have been just as great if he'd never come to New York. We were all lucky to get to know him. He's not only a great poet, prose innovator, he's a great commentator of our time, writing about what is overlooked or ignored in our society. He's our reporter. Well, if you say so, said the young man. The only beatnik I ever saw or knew was Maynard G. Krebs on TV. He was just like a caricature. I said, well, I'm always been, and I'm trying harder every day to improve on that. All right, said the young man, bursting into a sunny smile. You keep on improving. You got a good attitude. And you tell Kerouac he's got some readers down here. I always dug how he wrote about Charlie Parker and Monk and Dizzy. He seems to understand our music. You cats are all right. I thought about this during the party after the concert. You look worried, Dave, said Margot. I'm okay, I said. The concert was great. I can never thank you enough. I was just thinking about Jack. I know his health is bad, and he's lonely. I thought he'd get married again, said Margot. He did, I said. He told me his wife Stella is saving his life and looking after his mother, but even with her, he can't get over the hurt. He feels his old friends have all deserted him. He can't get over that hurt. And the worst of all, he feels he's already been forgotten about as a writer. I just wrote him a letter about all this. Young people love his work, even if they have to steal out-of-print copies of his books from libraries to share with their friends. The next chapter, Requiem, Jack's Final Days. In the spring of 1969, about 3:30 a.m. one morning, my phone rang. I jumped out of bed and staggered over to the phone in the tiny kitchen to answer it. My place, as usual, was in chaos. Papers and proofs were everywhere. I figured it was Terry Southern on the phone. He must be at the 55 bar hanging out with the boys and probably wanted me to come over for a nightcap. I didn't want to bum out Melody, who lay in bed glaring at me. She was a sweetheart, and we had so much fun. I didn't want to ruin our romance by inflicting my craziest of all my night owl friends on her, even though Terry always made Mary laugh for days after his unexpected late-night visits. I picked up the phone on what was probably its 40th ring. Alors, Terry, quelles sont les nouvelles, mon vieux? Hi, Terry, what's the news, Pops? C'est pas Terry, c'est Jackie. It's not Terry, it's Jack. Jack, I said, are you okay? Nah, he said, I'll never be okay. I never was okay. I'm just me, a poor boy from Lowell, Massachusetts, stuck down here in Florida. I heard him coughing, as he put down the phone. I could hear him slurping down a drink after his coughing had stopped. Here's to you and your music, Davy. How are all the beautiful gals in New York? Do you ever see Joyce or Dodie or Iseult? I miss New York. Man, I miss our soirees. We have to get together with Lamantia and Hart and do a concert again. You think anybody would come? You'd pack 'em in, Jack, I said. There's a whole new audience for your work out here. Tell the goddamn publishers that, said Jack. They're remaindering all my books here in America. Overseas, they're doing fine. I'm an American writer. Don't they read my books? We all do, I said. You got to take care of yourself. Your work is here to stay. You got to ride out the storm. Like Langston Hughes said, keep your eyes on the prize. Your letter was nice, said Jack. I know you haven't forgotten me. I feel like one of those old, washed up boxers who go to bars and wait for someone to say, didn't you used to be? Before being bought a drink, that is. Are you sure it's me those kids you wrote about in your letter are reading? Are you sure it's not Jack London? Ah ha ha, we both laughed. Tell Sari Southern to bring me a bagel, a regular coffee, and not to tell any of his filthy sexist jokes unless I haven't heard them before, said Melody, who had risen from bed and was now standing behind me in her flowered nightgown, all sweetness and good cheer. Let me speak to that old coot. It's not Terry, Melanie, I said. It's Jack Kerouac calling from Florida. Oh, said Melody. There goes my breakfast and bagel. Tell him I said hi. Maybe he can come up and visit us. We could drive him out to Northport. Send his wife and mother my best. I'd love to meet them all. I'm going back to sleep. Be sure and set the alarm. Melody sends you her love to you, Jack, and to Stella and Gabrielle, I said. That's your new true love you told me about, said Jack. Without the love of women, there's nothing but death. How about Stella and Gabrielle, I asked. Stella is a saint, said Jack. I got in a fight, got busted up, and she's helping me to type till I get better. Ma mère is sick. Stella's keeping us all alive. We have to play together and show all these lost kids about the sunny side of the street. Jack began to scat Sunny Side of the Street, based on the song, but stopped there for a few seconds. I can't do it, Davy. I'm sick. I heard him put down the phone, cough, and heard the familiar sound of slurping down a drink, followed by a thunderous belch. Davy, get your horn and play something for me over the phone. I walked into the other room, crawled under the piano and took out my horn and began playing into the phone. Davy, sweet sounds from old Manhattanos. Have you seen Dizzy? Does he remember the Frenchman, as he so elegantly referred to me, l'écrivain distingué, moi-même, the distinguished author myself? He must be playing better than ever. I saw him a month ago, I said. He's still carrying his message around the world. He'll never stop either. He knows the world didn't pass him by. He's still waiting for the world to catch up with him. How's the TV documentary they're doing about you coming along? Did they edit all of the cantata A Year in Our Land that you did with the Houston Symphony? Did they sing the selections from The Lonesome Traveler okay? It was fantastic, Jack, I said. The chorus, orchestra, and solos was smoking. They love you in Texas. It got fantastic reviews. That's good. C'est bon, said Jack. I hope they show it down here in St. Petersburg. How's Vibrations doing? It got great reviews, I said. I feel almost guilty since I'm not a writer. Everyone's a writer, said Jack. Everyone's got a story to tell. Knows how to tell it, said Jack. I'm working on a new book now. I think it will be a breakthrough, maybe even a movie. It's called Pick. Maybe my books will get reissued, and maybe finally Visions of Cody will get published, and then my remaindered books will come out again. Maybe I'll be judged by my words on the page instead of comparing me to beatnik poseurs and dooming me as the fallen king of the beat generation. I wish I'd never used that goddamn expression. I'm an author. I'm a writer. By your works ye shall be known. Amen, I said. Been to Mass, said Jack. Not since I went with you, I said. I'll say some prayers for you, Davy. I'll pray for you to have a family and for all of us to get a farm up in the mountains and sit down someday with our children and we'll lie in hammocks and Neil and Carolyn will get back together and bring their children. His voice trailed off. I heard him start coughing again, followed by more slurping sounds, terminated by another series of explosive belches. Oh, my goddamn ribs. I feel like a football player again. Davy, do you believe Neil is dead? I know he's putting everybody on. I keep waiting for him to show up at the door. Davy, play me Pull My Daisy on the piano, and we'll sing some 4-bar duets. I yanked the phone with this huge extension cord into the other room, tucked the phone between my chin and collarbone, and began playing and singing Pull My Daisy. Good God, David, when will you become secure enough to stop auditioning for the whole world? Said Melody, rising wearily from her pillow. My family's right. I should leave you. You're completely insane. I'm playing for Jack, I mouthed to her as I continued playing and singing into the phone. What? She said. This is for Jack Kerouac, I yelled. Oh, said Melody. All right. Don't forget to wake me up. Of course, this is for Jack Kerouac, bellowed Jack over the phone, almost knocking the receiver out of my ear. I'm the co-author with Neil and Alan and you. Play it, Davy. I continued playing and began singing, and Jack joined in. When we finally finished, he said, I'm going to get well and finish Pick, my new book. It'll bring me back. I'll show the world old Jack is not passe. My honor will be restored. I still have my pride. I know the value of my work. I'll stick to my guns. We're lyric artists, Davy. We're here for the duration. Give my love to Stella and Gabrielle. Tell your mother I said Lenny Gross is happily married and that I will be someday soon. I hope, and I'll keep my promise to her that I'll never marry a tramp. I'll come to the wedding, Davy, said Jack. Our best days are yet to come. I'm going to get healed up and stop drinking, and the world will change. I keep having dreams of moving back to Lowell, seeing everybody happy again, and coming to visit New York and having parties at Lucian's house and hearing all of us together again. Lucian, the kids, Dodie, Joyce, Bob Donlin, Holmes, Giraud, Sterling. His voice trailed off. He began coughing again. This time, there were no more slurping sounds. One more thing, Davy. Why I called, other than to be sure you and your new sweetheart were still loving each other every day. When I get back on my feet, you have to set those parts of On the Road for narrator and orchestra. You can conduct a symphony, and I'll narrate it, and we can go around the world. Some of the passages be accompanied by you playing spontaneously on the piano and then jumping back on the podium and conducting what you've written down. The spontaneous and the formal. Spontaneity and formality. Maybe we could start a duo using that name for our act and end up as two saintly old men with canes and tour the world. Laurel and Hardy, Jack and Jill, Abbott and Costello, Adam and Eve, Dizzy and Bird, spontaneous and formal. All the world's a stage and all its players, you know what I mean. I need a drink. Davy, are you still there? Yes, Jack, I was just thinking about what you said. That would be a great setting. On the road with an orchestra, just like Aaron Copland did with the Lincoln Portrait. Promise me you'll do it, said Jack. We'll get some great gigs. I'll buy a set of tails and we'll have the world premiere with the Boston Symphony. All my old friends from Lowell can come to the opening, and we'll bring Boston back to the hallowed days of the Boston Tea Party. We'll bring some fine tea and we could smoke it in the lobby during intermission after our triumphant debut performance when Boston's dour patronesses are transported into the raptures of sweet Mary Jane's marijuana ecstasy. And we can give them all recipes for the Quebecois delicacies like moose pie, old Lowell High School football buddies' family recipes for fried squid, and our famous baked beans. Even though I've stopped drinking, I'll give the editor of the Boston Globe a hit of Thunderbird wine since he never experienced the poetry of a night on Moody Street when Lowell was in flower and the jazz greats graced the evening with sweet music to the ear. We can do it, Davy. We can write an opera together. We can do readings together again. I know we can, Jack, I said. Let's not stop doing what we started to doing before we died, Davy. I won't, said Jack. Turn the other cheek, he said. Always have, always will, I said. Davy, are you ever going to spend 3 days just lying in a hammock, picking your teeth and doing nothing but meditating to cleanse your mind for your next masterpiece? I don't think so, Jack, I said. I don't have the time for that. I don't either, said Jack. I was just checking. I'll see you this summer. We'll go to Northport to Gunther's Bar with Stanley Twardowitz and find Adolf the Clamor and go out on his boat and shock the New York intelligentsia when they see the new Jack Kerouac drinking ginger ale like his own compatriot Davy, and we'll storm New York. We'll go back to the Cafe Figaro. We'll ask them where to find an old farm in the mountains where we can all be together. Sounds like a perfect plan to me, Jack, I said. I always plan perfectly, said Jack. Sometimes the plans don't pan out. Without the love of women, there's nothing but death. Give Melanie a kiss and be good to her. A bientôt, Jack, I said. I hung up the phone. God, you and Jack have such long conversations, said Melody, now awake for the day. He must be terribly lonely down there in Florida, away from all his old friends. He is, I said. Any of us would be. He's looking after his mother and trying to find peace in his life with Stella so that he can write more. He's never gotten over the death of Neil. He has to stop drinking, but the only way that he can stop his pain is by drinking, and it's killing him. I don't know what to do. All you can do is make him know that he loves you, said Melanie. You can take care of yourself. Don't kill yourself. Don't be self-destructive. All you guys are so desperate to prove to the world that you are right about what you believe in. Stop trying to prove so much. Just do your work. Enjoy the simple things and learn how to relax. Let yourself be loved. I've got to go to work. Good luck finishing your horn concerto. Let's go to Casey's tonight for dinner when I get back. You can bring your horn and sit in with Freddie Red, and we'll go home early and both get a good night's sleep. Okay, Melanie, I said, I love you. You're really understanding. There's not much to understand, she said. All you guys just need to calm down and grow up. If I wanted to be with the dentist, I wouldn't have chosen you. I'm glad you and Jack talked. I know how much you love each other and how much you worry about him. Aren't you glad you spoke and played music on the phone? You're the most positive person I've ever met in my life. Why do you look so sad? You guys will be together soon. I hope so, I said, but I don't know. He didn't sound right. He'll be fine, said Melanie. all those ex-football players live forever. I'll see you tonight, and we'll go to Casey's later for dinner. And that concludes our reading for this week. And next week, I'll continue about the programs that we did in Louisville, Kentucky, and other places in memory of Jack with a new generation of writers and readers and people. But now we're going to celebrate our special guest. And since Jack always said, we always said as one of our mantras, by your works ye shall be known. By her works, she's already known, and we're celebrating her. She's still with us tonight. She's just here, but in New York City in a huge storm. So we send her our love, and we're just so happy that she was kind enough to send us some videos of her work. And then we'll have our special guests, François Mirapti, who's going to read some poetry in French. And of course, James Canary, the keeper of the scroll, who knows so much about Jack's work and Hetty's work as well, and the wonderful artistry of Norton Wisdom. And thanks to our creator of this program, otherwise I'd be sitting at home watching CNN and really be bummed out. Her name is Pamela Dickerson.
Hello.
And also our producer, technical wizard, performance artist, composer, writer, poet, and man of all seasons, only 32 years old and already way ahead of all of us, which is a good sign to hang out with people who know more than you, Mr. Anthony Demarbiex. And Anthony is here as well, and we hope to hear from him. And of course, we have some wonderful people in the Zoom audience. We hope that perhaps we can include them in tonight's program. And now we're going to see two wonderful videos by Hetty Jones, and then we're going to know more about her great books that she wrote about Bob Marley's wife, and the wonderful book that she wrote about so many different women who were struggling in the arts.
Big
well
Star, Fallen Mama, 5 Women in Black.
And also as well as her work as a teacher at the New School and so many other places for so long, and her work in prisons, encouraging women prisoners to use their time there to become writers. So here is on tape reading is the great Hetty Jones.
Weather. My folder of poems labeled Weather holds no clues as to whether or not there'll be any weather to count on, say, a hard rain like little nails, or that deluge plunging radiant. Now that we've plunged into war, and wars don't stop like rain stops, like that last slow drizzle onto the old tin bathroom vent, sweet hint of growth in the soft, wet drift north. Fire or ice, fire or ice. Are you breathing? Are you lucky enough to be breathing?
And there's a second video. Perhaps you could while Anthony's getting that up, you could, oh, here we are. Yasmin, how are you?
Anthony, do you have the next video ready?
Yes, just hold on a couple of seconds, guys.
Thank you.
While we're setting that up, maybe Yasmin, we want to thank you for coming, and please send your mom our love and everyone else in New York.
Nice
we're all in different places. They're out in California, and I'm here in Beacon, New York. And seeing Hetty's work and seeing her reading is just such a thrill. And here she is in another video.
Good. This is called Having Been Her. I wrote it probably in the mid-70s, and it refers to a very, very long time ago. On the bus from Newark to New York, The baby pukes into the fox collar of her only coat. She wipes the collar and the baby's soft face, then takes her toddler by the hand and heads for the subway, where the toddler sleeps at her knee and she, herself, stares out the window over the head of the sleeping baby. She is 27 and very tired. Let me always support her, having been her, befriend her. So that's why I take on the responsibility of mentoring young women and being available to represent women. And I hope I can do that for a few more years at least.
Well, you're doing quite a bit. You teach at the 92nd Street Y, a memoir class.
And I teach writing for children to graduate students at the New School.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm advising a couple of students this semester, one of whom is in the writing for children aspect of the program. The other is in nonfiction.
Huh.
So it's interesting. And then there are lots of whole generation of young women who are the friends of my daughters, and I like mothering them as well. I like that. That's a good thing. At least being a role model. You know, up until I was, I don't know, up until maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I had never met a woman older than I who whose life I could see myself in. But I'm fortunate to know Marie Ponceau, who's just been 90, and I know another Marie who's 91. So I take inspiration from those people as well.
So it sounds like a good chain of
Yeah.
inspiring women.
Yeah, and it's something to pass along. And as I said, I have a granddaughter now, so yeah.
Well, Hetty, thank you so much.
And that was Hetty. Yasmin, since you're there, could you say a few words too? Yasmin?
Hi.
Oh, maybe you could say a few words since you're there. Are you in New York now?
I'm in New York, but I think I'm a different Yasmin than you think. I met you through Morley a while back.
Well, thank you for tuning in.
I'm
I
thrilled
only
to
mentioned
be
that
here.
because one of the things that Hetty was interested in, and I've been interested in, we were probably much younger than you. I knew her back in the 50s. I was already almost a senior citizen then of 25. But when I was way younger than that, I met all these great older people who gave me a hand, and instead of ignoring me, saying you can't, you're nobody, you can't do anything for me, they actually almost acknowledged that I was part of the human species. I was on Earth, and the so-called Beat Generation, which never existed, fortunately. If it was as awful as what we're told it was, we all would have changed our names. We were just a bunch of friends, and the older people we knew were called bohemians, not by themselves, but since they never had a hit book out or weren't able to sell T-shirts or records, they were more like individuals, which every single person on Earth so far is in the human species. We're all individual people. And I remember as a younger person, I was always encouraged by somebody who was older to dare to try to do something. I see you have a guitar there, so obviously you playing some music too.
I don't know that I'd call it playing, but I enjoy music.
Great. Well, we can't get enough of that. And it was interesting because the musicians that when I knew Hetty, she and her then husband, who was known then as Leroy Jones, became Amiri Baraka. Before their kids were born, she they used to come out to different places, and we played at the 5 Spot, and everything I learned from painting and from all the arts and literature and writing and acting were just bumping into other people who invited me into their world when they saw I could say please and thank you and was sincere. And I hope that that happens for you. And that's why we're glad to see you here, because that's the whole idea. Any of us that are, I'm 90 now, so our gig, and I think Hetty's too, when she teaches and has all the, not only the wonderful books that she's written about the Big Mama, the 5 Big Mamas, the great women artists, but just about anything and everybody. And the women she worked with in prisons was to share what was bequeathed upon us with others. And that's what a lot of us are glad to do. And, you know, the whole business society is to structure everybody into age groups and say, well, the blonde teenagers of 16 can't hang out with people who are 18 because that's a different species, a different market. And the demographics of trying to put people in different categories by their age alone is just part of the whole picture. And I think your generation, if I can dare say that, is aware that there's something out there much more important than the tsunami of garbage which has been dumped upon you and probably your parents. The last 40 years, we've all been merchandised out of our minds. And still, the human condition is much more than that. So the reason my book was called Offbeat, collaborating with Kerouac, is because we were part of a much bigger picture of collaboration. And
David, darling, we have queued up the video where, of Hetty. She's going to do a poem for Ginsberg. So it's on our screen. Let's roll it. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Yasmin.
Hetty John.
The mic. The mic. This happens all the time. I do have a loud voice. There's the mic. Thank you. Well, all of this marvelous noise, I'm going to be a little quiet. What do you know? Anyway, I'm really glad we're here to celebrate Alan and music, because it was music that occasioned our first meeting one cold night at the end of 1958, before all of you were born. When he was writing Kaddish, but he didn't know how to sing it. And my then husband thought I could help. I was 24, newly married, and slightly pregnant. And after walking a long way across town, found myself bent over this nice man who listened intently to me while I chanted, V'yiskara, v'yiskara, shemei rabor, though I had recently been cast out of the tribe. This didn't seem to matter to Alan, and we spent some time practicing and davening a little. But what was, and still is, most important was that Alan's first impression of me was based, unlike most women, on something I could do, rather than my being a chick looking for kicks. And with me, he was always like that. One time we were together in Minneapolis at the old Guthrie Theater, which was a theater in the round, kind of like the way we are today. And after I made my beat chick speech, I got a standing ovation, the first in my life. And I was so excited, and I whirled off stage. I was just ecstatic. And I went right into the arms of Alan, who was going on next. And he said to me, when did you write that? Oh, I was so happy. And he went on stage to sing Father Death. He had already been sick, so I stood there listening with my heart in my mouth. And after he died, I wrote several little poems for him, and one of them goes, Alan's soul has left for heaven, and his mortal remains are divided on earth. 1/3 west, this is true. 1/3 west, another east, another in the middle. Now, at last, he gives himself to everyone at once. What can't be done in life is easily done in death. Rest easy, friend, in all your new locations. Parted self from self, you still are one. So, I've chosen to read Broken Bone tonight because it was written in 1973, and it seems to be so prescient. I wish I could sing it, but even though I read music as well as Hebrew, I couldn't get where those 3 sharps were supposed to land. They were too close together. After I hear him sing, I'll get it right. Meanwhile, I'll just do what I can. It's got a little quote at the beginning. Broken bone blues. Naropa, your clay picture of a body believing in an eye deserves to be broken. Broken bone, 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 all over the ground. Broken bone, 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 everywhere. The sound of broken bone, bone, bone. Everyone brought down. Everyone brought down to broken. Bone, 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 broken head and bony crown. Broken bone, 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 broken guru king and clown. Broken bone, 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 to the boneyard I am bound. To the boneyard I am bound. Broken heart, broken toe. Broken soul, broken nose, broken heaven, broken woe, broken body into broken earth must go. Into broken earth must go. When my bones all break, I must feel my way to death. When all my bones break, when my meat starts to scrape, through death I will escape to heaven through my heart, to heaven through my heart's breath. Broke my leg under my knee, broke my heart, broke my greed, broke my body like a dog, like a scared dog indeed, broke my dumb body so God could see me. So God could see me, he broke my body. Broken bones, oh Lord, I'll give my house away. Broken bones, oh God, it was never mine anyway. Broken bones, oh Buddha, take my skull today. Oh, take back my skull someday. Break, 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 oh bones everywhere. Break, 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 oh soul in the black air. Break, break, break my body. God, take care my body. God, take good care. Take your time, oh Lord. Break my bones 10 times 10. Take your time, oh death, and you can tell me when. Farewell, swift body dream. God bless me again. Come down, God, bless me again, and I'll come back and bless you again. Thank you.
Right. Beautiful. And that was done. If you notice, the 2 red conga drums were sitting in front of her. That was at a concert that we played at too. Those are my drums. And Bob Rosenthal, who worked with Alan for years, was the person who was the MC. And this was at a bookstore. We did it as a benefit concert to raise money for a wonderful program. And it was just so nice to see, for all of you to be able to see and hear Hetty reading from her work. She was a terrific poet. And as you know, in addition to working in the prisons, helping out women and doing so many teaching jobs at different schools and colleges, she also is a founder of Jugend magazine, which she was mostly, and Baraka himself said as well, we all knew that she did 98% of the work and cranked by hand copies of the machine that she used to put the magazine out. And at the time, we never dreamed it would become part of the historical experience. And now perhaps, Pamela, you could tell the people about working with Jim Canary, and then Jim can tell us about what it was like when he went on the road, and then your friend from France could read the poem. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to present the person whom you've seen, who made this show possible. She created the whole idea, Miss Pamela Dickerson.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's so nice to be here today. I'm sending big love from Hetty Jones. We spoke to her for many hours this week. She's 86. She wants you to know she's 86. And she is sharp as a tack, irascible, she said. But I only had the experience of her generous, warm, loving heart, wonderful soul. And she would love to come on and be live with us another day. She has done so much for the ladies in prison and has been teaching up until COVID. And her archives are at Columbia. And Jim Canary, would you like to talk with us about her a bit? I think your mic, you need to unmic, dear.
Yeah, well, at the Lilly Library, we have two collections of Leroy Jones manuscripts. The first one consists of 4 cartons of material that deals with Eugen, Floating Bear, where they collaborated in the editing of that magazine, and a lot in correspondence as well. But the one thing that's really nice is to see the layouts and all of the way that these early works were put together and organized. So we have that at the Lilly. If people are interested, you can go to our website and just use a keyword search for Leroy Jones Mass. The second collection we have of that material consists of 2 plays of his. We also have a number of other poetry collections that you may be interested in, that also many of these people are involved with. One is the Sid Corman collection. He also he was a poet, a translator, and editor of a magazine called Origin, which was he did from Kyoto. So there's many, many wonderful collections of people of this era, writers and collaborators. And so I welcome you to come to the Lilly Library if you want to do research in this area. We're just undergoing renovation and should be reopening summer 2021. So keep us in mind.
And also, Jim, today we're going to have Frank Merabti, who you met when the scroll was at the Autry. We did a program, which I've mentioned, with the French school in Burbank, the Lycée International, and my son's French teacher, who's a French literary expert, went on board with doing spontaneous prose with his classroom and playing live instruments. And then we went to the Autry on a field trip. They were sophomores at the time. Frank is going to read from Eugen, episode number 6. There's an extraordinary intelligentsia poem that Jack Kerouac wrote about one of his heroes, Rimbaud. And so he is informed enough to understand the depth of this poem. It's actually in English with some French, Dave. That's the poem that we're going to do in a bit.
Right.
Anthony, are you there with some explanations of what Eugen means? I first read about Hetty and Eugen in Barry Miles' The Beat Hotel, and I assumed that it was a German word, but it's actually comes from a Japanese word. Are you there, Anthony? All right, he might have checked out, but he'll be back. And Frank is going to come on around 7:30.
Well, I can say with Eugen that it was just something that was handmade, and it was done spontaneously. What they now call chapbooks, but at that time, there was a lot of big publishing companies, and they didn't really have a large amount of poetry being published. And mostly it was poets were from Europe, which is great. But most we have to remember that Walt Whitman had to publish Leaves of Grass himself, not because he was a masochist or shy, but no one was interested. And Jack had 26 versions of On the Road that were rejected before it finally got published. When I had the same representative, Sterling Roy, for my first book, Vibrations, he said, David, you just broke Jack's record. I said, what? He said, he had 26 rejections. You've had 27 for Offbeat collaborating with Kerouac. So fortunately, the 29th, the 30th was accepted, and now all three of my books are in print. I say that to all you younger folks. If you get a rejection slip, don't be upset. That's par for the course. And if necessary, do it yourself, because indie is not only was the way, but now indie will be and always is the way. With new technology, you don't need to go to a record company. You don't need to spend 25 years raising money to make a movie that's never going to be distributed. You can do the whole thing with an iPhone. You can even make your own recording with an iPhone. And this is just the beginning. That doesn't mean that technology is supposed to take us over. I still write out stuff by hand when I write my symphonies, not because I'm a masochist. I don't wear a white powdered wig. I do have underneath the picture of Charlie Parker and Dizzy and Miles, I have my main man, Franz Schubert, on the piano. But I write it out by hand because at 90, it would take me so long to learn how to do it by computer with the loving care that I could do it by hand, that I wouldn't have a chance to write any more music. I'd be waiting until over my 100th birthday to get to the point that I can already do another way. But the spirit always has to do with looking for excellence and looking for beauty. And now with the technology, using the technology, you can see the old timers and your own friends and celebrate the beauty that surrounds you and find out that there's infinite possibilities. And in the 1950s, we were just told we're at the bottom of a worthless heap. And therefore, if you wanted to be an artist, you were just a complete psychotic failure and a disgrace to your family and to civilization. So therefore, when On the Road got such a staggering review, Jack almost felt guilty that he was being accepted to that extent. And when he was suddenly appointed the king of the beat generation, when he was 35 years old and had written 11 books, and except for Town and the City, had nothing published and was considered to be a nobody minus, suddenly he was not comfortable in the role of being the number one cat who was going to change everything and part of some movement like the 10 Days that shook the world, or the Shriners, the Boy Scouts of America. He had joined the Merchant Marine and the Navy and been a football player. I'd been in the 4-H club, U.S. Army, and was in some bands, but none of us were joiners. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Everybody is, and always will be an individual person with a collective consciousness, hopefully. And that's what was so wonderful about Jugend, because they took that spirit that was there in the East Village, and rather than saying, well, all these people that can't do anything in life and want to write poetry should go shove it, rather than being in the winology, blameology frame of mind, they created this amazing literary magazine, and Hetty Jones was the one who cranked it out physically as well as mentally and helped to organize it. And a lot of the writers that they publish are now all taught in colleges and schools and everything. And I don't think any of them, especially Hetty or myself or Jack certainly, would want to think that we were part of some exclusive club. All of us hoped in our own way we could foster creativity in others and make other people feel that they could do something with and for people to raise the bar a little bit and encourage other people to feel creative. Just wanted to mention that because you don't see that in any of the textbooks, because you can't raise any money by saying that you just want to do something beautiful while you're here. But that's why we were all here. And I know, Jim, when you take that scroll around, you've always commented to us about this feeling it gives you with all the years you've been doing that, and what it gives to young people who come up and talk to you, and the fact that you don't blow them off and speak to them makes them feel that they're part of it.
Yeah, there's one thing, you guys talk about the beat generation, right? Well, Jack had a really nice thing. I think he said, beat doesn't mean tired or bushed so much that it means beato, the Italian for beatific, to be in a state of beatitude like St. Francis, trying to love all life, trying to be utterly sincere with everyone, practicing endurance, kindness, cultivating joy of heart. How can this be done in our mad modern world of multiplicities and millions? By practicing a little solitude, going off by yourself once in a while to store up that most precious of gold, the vibrations of sincerity. I think that really hits it. The things that you've been putting out all this session of your readings. So,
Well, I hope so. And what was that from? I never heard that.
well, that was an excerpt from a book that I just had gotten turned on to. It's called "Hard to Be a Saint in the City: The Spiritual Vision of the Beats." Do you know that book? Anyway, he had that as one of the excerpts that was taken from Kerouac. So I haven't gotten back to the original source of that, but I thought it was beautiful.
Sure is. Yeah, that says it all.
Yeah, I was going to share that with Steve Eddington. I thought if he doesn't know it, I thought he'd appreciate it.
Well, I think everybody would appreciate it. And if you've never read Jack Kerouac, that can encourage you. And we can remember the famous prayer that was the basis of what's called the Golden Rule, which is Ve'ahavta le'arecha chamoka, means love thy neighbor as thyself. And the great Sonny Rollins, as I mentioned on the program, I guess about 3 times, told me, he said, man, people are so upset with the current misadministration and Cyrus the virus that they forget about the golden rule. He said, that's really the only thing I think about at 90. He said, I can't get around much anymore. I don't play the saxophone, but I try to practice that. And he said, that's really the most important thing in life. He said, not just me, take, but give a little, to give something. And he said, the spirit, he said, the body turns to dust, but the spirit lasts forever. And I thought that was interesting from a very spiritual, great, fantastic musician who saw that there was something bigger than himself. And Sonny epitomizes that not only in his music, but in his life. And Jack did in his writing. And Hetty does for what she does with her life, and a lot of people do. So when they try to merchandise the Beat Generation as being a second coming of the Kardashian sisters, that's fine, but it's 2 different things. And I'm not putting down the Kardashian sisters. They're doing the best they can to make a living. God bless them. And if they make people happy, that's a good thing. However, there's another way of looking and doing stuff that might even be more rewarding in the long run. And that's what we hope this program can encourage people at least to think about that, and think about that in themselves. And remember, if they get something good in life from that, or from reading Jack's books or anything we do, try to share that with others. Being greedy and selfish is not good for the health, and it's sure a drag to be around. You know all that anyway, and I'm sure the readers do.
How about we talk a little bit about Hetty did the book Big Star Fallen Mama, 5 Women in Black, and that's Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, Mahalia Jackson, Billie Holiday, and Aretha Franklin. If anyone would like to speak on those wonderful, powerful females.
Well, there was one woman we know in the audience. Is Yasmin, are you still there? Or did she tune out?
I'm here.
There. Okay. Since you're a woman, you could speak better for women than any of us guys is just trying to figure out what's up, and never will.
When I think of those women, will you say the names again, Pamela?
Yes, Yasmin, Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, Mahalia Jackson, Billie Holiday, and Aretha Franklin. Respect.
Yeah, when I hear those names together, I just feel in my soul just power and deeply tapped in. which seemed to allow them to then give generously of themselves completely through that craft. And I also feel like, you know, speaking as a woman, that feels deeply feminine.
Have you seen the beautiful documentary on, well, the film on Ma Rainey and the documentary talking about Ma Rainey? Is it on Netflix, I think,
It's
or
on,
Amazon? Not sure.
I believe it's on Netflix. I have not seen that yet.
It's extraordinary, and it's done like the play. So the way it's shot is just like a moment in time, not actually telling her whole life story, but it's like a theater play. It's beautiful. The performance is extraordinary. And David, did you ever come across Billie Holiday yourself?
Yes, I did. I was sitting in the office of Joe Glazer, who was kind of immortalized in Lenny Bruce's great record, Religions Incorporated, where he took the three major religions and pretended they were in the Joe Glazer booking office and had everybody speaking like a merchandising booker representing the religions. And Joe Glazer himself was a very powerful person at the height of the music industry's many of his most corrupt eras. And Billie Holiday was having him as her, I guess, booker representative. And we thought, my gosh, how could you keep Billie Holiday waiting? She was so elegant and such a nice woman. I was with a great brother French horn player named Julius Watkins. We were the two French horn players that were improvising, had our own groups and played jazz. We played with our competitors. Anyway, we were sitting around talking with her for about 45 minutes because Joe Glazer, they said he was in his office and we could hear screaming going on. And she told us all about her life in Baltimore and going out and dreaming of becoming a singer and everything that she went through. She was so elegant and so beautiful and so warm and so interesting and strong and vulnerable, all those things at the same time, and sensitive and so refined. And she was just sitting there. And Julius was a wonderful musician and a great guy. And we were just having such a good time talking. We forgot we were there to see maybe if we could get our group some gigs, but she was already one of his clients. Finally, fortunately, it happened this way, or I never would have spent that much time with her quietly. And we heard this screaming. Suddenly, it looked like the door was breaking down, and Joe Glazer threw someone through the door with a hot mink coat that the person was trying to sell him, but Joe Glazer wouldn't pay enough for a hot coat, so he threw the guy. They got in the big argument. Joe Glazer threw him out of the office. Fortunately, no one was shot. And then he said, "All right, Billy, come on in now." And so, even though he was so Mr. Crude, she just walked in as if she was seeing some European royalty or something, because she was very royal herself. She was also a huge help to Yolandi Bavan, who was the replacement for when Lambert Hendricks and Ross were singing and Annie Ross had to leave. They couldn't find someone to take her place. And Yolandi, whom they'd seen as a Shakespearean actress and dancer, loved jazz and was a friend of Billie. Billie kind of adopted her and took her under her wing. So Yolandi was able to come, and Billie would always, anytime she came to England, would always call up Yolandi and hang out with her and try to give her advice as to what to do and what to look out for and how to not to get ripped off. And Billie was so proud of her that she very often came whenever Lambert Hendricks and now Lambert Hendricks and Bavan were singing. Yolandi was from Sri Lanka, and she was an incredible performer. She also was in Shakespeare in the Park doing Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream, and I wrote a song, classical song for her. She could do it, both kinds of music. And Billie Holiday loved that music. And her pianist at the very end, Mal Waldron, and he just raved about her too, how her phrasing was just so magnificent. And I wrote a piece called Partners, and the first movement was for Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger as musical partners. The second movement was for Lester Young and Billie Holiday. His nickname was Prez, and hers was Lady Day. So the second movement's called Prez and Lady Day, and the third was from Machito and Celia Cruz. And the second movement, I tried not to capture what Billie Holiday and Lester Young had already done, because that was already classical and perfect. You don't need some symphony grinding away elevator music style to glamorize what's already perfect. I just used their feeling and their love of the sanctified church and jazz and blues and Chopin and whatever came across their path as a way of hopefully honoring them. They were just extraordinary people. And she was a musician's favorite because she always made everybody who was playing with her and the audience feel they were part of the music. She put the music ahead of herself, and her performances remain iconic. And so many people are influenced by her and Ella Fitzgerald, but those were two different, magnificent singers. And so are the other four singers that are mentioned in Hetty's book as well. And it's nice that Hetty wrote the book and that we could be discussing that on this program. Something America can be proud of. And Dizzy told me on his 70th birthday, he said, man, he said, our music is so great. I don't know if America even deserves it, but I'm going to keep playing it anyway. And that's what Billie Holiday did through thick and thin and all those other great people. They gave us an enormous gift, whether we deserve it or not. They didn't care. They gave us that gift anyway. So if you can't summon up being able to say thank you, we can at least pay attention as a first step towards acknowledging what is a treasure. And if you go overseas, which a lot of us do who are lucky enough before the COVID to travel overseas, you could see that even people who hate America love our music. So it's a great gift for us and the whole world to have. That's pretty terrific. If you can make any kind of a contribution, you're doing a heck of a thing. And Billie Holiday made a splendid contribution that will always be here. And so did Hetty Jones, and still does at 86. And that ends my sermon.
Well, there's many things I would like to say about Hetty Jones, and yet they're kind of delicate, which is how courageous was. You could see she's just a petite woman, but man, she's got so much vigor and gusto. And to have pulled together those Jugend magazines with all of those poets actually helping them so much with their careers by publishing that magazine. And she's so sweet. She talks about the Rimbaud poem of Jack Kerouac. She said, oh, it wasn't me, it was Joyce Johnson. She's always talking about how much Joyce Johnson helped with maybe bringing poets.
Oh yeah, and Joyce still does. She's one of our great writers. And contrary to some of the books written by Jack Kerouac about him, which I guess those people never read his books or they didn't know him, they would find the same thing as you did, because what he wrote in his books was exactly what he was like. He loved all writers who were writing from the heart and had a story to tell. And he appreciated Carson McCullers and Joan Didion and so many other amazing writers, and the writers that from Emily Bronte on up and before them, and Marie Cassatt, a great 19th century painter, all these women who really had a hard, impossible time. And he appreciated their work and what they had to contribute. And he loved Joyce's work. And Joyce was a champion of his book, Visions of Cody. It finally got it published long after she won the National Book Award. She managed to force them to publish Visions of Cody, which he could never do in his lifetime. And Joyce's own biography, her new biography of Jack Kerouac, is just incredible. And also Joyce was the first person who humanized Jack's mother as being a real human being rather than a stereotype, cliche, racist, disgusting version of some kind of a French Canadian bag lady, which was unfortunately the way many women were treated. And when they used to have those programs called Beat Chicks, God help us, at the Beat Generation conferences, or Beat Women of the Beat Generation, suddenly all these brilliant women like Carolyn Cassidy and Joyce and so many others were all degraded into being put in that cesspool and had to spend the entire program explaining that they were more than the cesspool definition of who they were. And then that was compounded by saying the men were such swine that that was all that they deserved. So it was a certain way, unconscious way, and you can't really be resentful of the people that created that, because basically they're people who were so trained to feel inferior themselves because they weren't 19th century European titles, ladies and gentlemen, and would never get invited to Buckingham Palace. They felt that they were really nothing. Now, fortunately, in 2021, people are growing up with a slightly, not that much, but a slightly different orientation, which is, why don't we keep it for real and see if we're dealing with somebody, what they are and what their story is, rather than the label that's slapped upon them, whether they wish to be labeled or not.
David, we're ready. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Jim?
Yeah, another woman who was involved with Leroy Jones was Diane DePrima at that time, who also we lost this year.
Yes, I can imagine that's a delicate subject on a Hetty Jones show. But it's an amazing group of people, and their interaction together is so majorly historic that we're talking about it right now. We have Frank Merabti. He's on with us now. Hello,
Hey,
Frank.
everyone.
He's on mic.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm so in awe of French literature and masters of it, which are you. And Anthony, are you there to say what does Eugen mean? We're going to be having Rimbaud from Jack Kerouac's Rimbaud poem in Eugen.
Yes, I am here. And yes, so a little primer on Eugen really quickly. It is this Japanese concept of sort of understanding the awe and the wonder of what is currently happening, and also understanding that in life, you know, we see the decay and the birth of things, the signifiers that we are passing through, and it is something that is both, you know, beautiful and tragic, and it reminds us that we are constantly in this process and motion. And I've always thought it was a really cool concept. So yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Frank. Salut.
Hi,
Comment ça
everybody.
va? Bonne année.
Merci, you too.
Can you see David Amaram? He's the host of our show.
I see
Je viens
everybody.
dire simplement, bonne chance pour nous. Merci
Yeah.
ici, et pour tous les gens en audience, souhaitons la bienvenue, messieurs et mesdames, à le grand poète et intellectuel, Monsieur François Marati, which means, ladies and gentlemen, let's be happy that the wonderful person is here. And don't forget to tip the waitress, Mr. François Marati.
Merci beaucoup. I recognize Jim because I saw you in LA during the scroll exhibit. It was, I think, 2014.
Oh.
Yeah.
And it was a delightful moment.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was great to see it like in live, the scroll. And I don't remember when the scroll edition was published, but I read it, and it was really something far from different from the original, I mean, the former editions.
Yes. I'm very curious, the kids' reactions when you took them to see the scroll.
Well, you know, when I think when you see the scroll, I'm sorry for my rotten English. I'm not super fluent in English, but I'm gonna drop a few mistakes here and then. But when the kids saw the scroll, I think it makes sense because, you know, a work of art has to be meaningful, of course, but the form of it needs also to be shaped in a nice way. And I think they were very sensitive to the object of the scroll, and because it kind of gave the passion of Kerouac in it. Like when you see that, you are in a oh you see the investment of the author. So it's very important for them to see that, and they were quite amazed by the length of this piece of art.
Yeah.
And after they dive totally in the kind of happening that we've got in the cafe with Pamela, you know, with the mic, and they were like just screaming words. And it was,
Beatboxing Jack Kerouac's words with a bunch of
yeah,
cowboys there for a luncheon. It was so
it was a great
fantastic.
experience.
Can you tell us about the project that you did with the spontaneous prose in the class?
Well, we tried to you said that because I went to LA. I came in LA in 2014, so it was my first year here. And the one thing that I discovered in LA, it's the expression "let go." You know, I'm French. I'm very rational, and for me, "let go" it's not so obvious at this. You know, like what does it mean? And so that's what we did. We tried to just find something in themselves to just open and celebrate and express, and that's what we did. And it was also a collective work. Like I make them write, you know, in French, in English, about this exhibit and about Kerouac in particular, and about also Louis Ferdinand Céline, because Kerouac was a fan of Journey into the Night, and I like this author. So, and Rimbaud also, you know, I'm teaching literature in 10th grade, so it was for me the opportunity to make a link between the French literature and maybe something that's truly American as Kerouac, you know. So it was a nice way to rely or to link the two culture by the scroll, actually, like the road. So it was a nice moment.
Yes, and we created an environment for the sophomores where they were dancing around with each other like dingle dotties, and to tell the principal of the school, hey, these kids are going to be expressing some freedom of expression with this Kerouac prose that they had memorized, and they were dancing all over the school. They were on stage playing instruments. They were just parlaying Kerouac language as complete conversations, and that class became so close from that project.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was lost. It was too much creativity and happiness for me at that moment, but I really enjoyed it.
You were a great sport. And we also said, once we get on the bus to go to the Autry Museum, we say, hey, kids, you're going to be on your own reconnaissance. We weren't going to tell them, do this, do that. And we let them be leaders and get a real understanding of being on the road. And it was about them and not about them being disciplined. And they became so creative.
Yeah, it was a great group.
So are you ready to hit some heavy duty Rimbaud poem on us from Kerouac?
Yeah, so Pamela asked me to read a poem by Kerouac called Rimbaud, published in Jungen, number 6, I think.
Yes.
My first move was to say no, because I'm kind of shy, and but thinking 2 seconds, I said to myself, well, I enjoy the road by Kerouac, and if I love the book, I can't say no. I have to go. I have to just do it. So I'm going to do it. And it's quite a little long, but I'm going to try to make it, as much as comfortable for you. And sorry for the little mistakes that I'm going to make here and there again. So I choose to try to read also the French words in French, and keep the French side of Kerouac alive. So I'm gonna. Are you all like listening to me? Okay,
We're listening, and you're streaming to thousands of people.
Okay. So Rimbaud. Arthur, on t'appela pas Jean. Born in 1854, cursing in Charleville, thus paving the way for the abominable murderousness of Ardennes. No wonder your father left. So you entered school at 8, proficient little Latinist you. In October of 1869, Rimbaud is writing poetry in Greek French, takes a runaway train to Paris without a ticket. The miraculous Mexican brakeman throws him off the fast train to heaven, which he no longer travels because heaven is everywhere. Nevertheless, the old fags intervene. Rimbaud, nonplussed Rimbaud, trains in the Green National Guard, proud, marching in the dust with his heroes, hoping to be buggered, dreaming of the ultimate goal. Cities are bombarded as he stares and chews his degenerate lip and stares with grey eyes at walled France. André Gide was forerunner to André Gide, long walks reading poems in the Genet haystacks. The Voyant is born. The deranged seer makes his first manifesto, gives vowels colors and consonants carking care, comes under the influence of old French fairies who accuse him of constipation of the brain and diarrhea of the mouth. Verlaine summons him to Paris with less aplomb than he did banish girls to Abyssinia. Merde, screams Rimbaud at Verlaine's salon. Gossip in Paris. Verlaine's wife is jealous of a boy with no seats to his trousers. Love sends money from Brussels. Mother Rimbaud hates the importunity of Madame Verlaine. Degenerate Arthur is suspected of being a poet by now. Screaming in the barn, Rimbaud writes Season in Hell. His mother trembles. Verlaine sends money and bullets into Rimbaud. Rimbaud goes to the police and presents his innocence like the pale innocence of his divine feminine Jesus. Poor Verlaine, 2 years in the can, but could have got a knife in the heart. Illumination, Stuttgart, study of languages. On foot, Rimbaud walks and looks through the Alpine, passes into Italy, looking for clover bells, rabbits, Jenny kingdoms, and ahead of him, nothing but the old Canaletto death of sun and old Venetian buildings. Rimbaud studies language, hears of the Alleghanies, of Brooklyn, of last American pledges. His angel sisters dies. Vienne. He looks at pastries and pets old dogs, I hope. His mad cat joins the Dutch army and sails for Java, commanding the fleet at midnight on the bow, alone. No one hears his command, but every fish is shining in the sea. August is no time to stay in Java. Aiming at Egypt, he's again hung up in Italy, so he goes back home to deep armchair, but immediately he goes again to Cyprus to run a gang of quarry workers. What did he look like now, this later Rimbaud? Rock dust and black backs and hacks of coffers. The dream rises in the Frenchman's Africa mind. Invalids from the tropic are always loved. The Red Sea in June, the coast clanks of Arabia. Havar, Havar, the magic trading post. Aden, Aden, south of Bedouin. Ogaden, Ogaden, never known. Meanwhile, Verlaine sits in Paris over cognacs, wondering what Arthur looks like now and how bleak their eyebrows because they believe in earlier eyebrow beauty. Who cares? What kind of Frenchmen are these? Rimbaud, hit me over the head with that rock. Serious Rimbaud composes elegant and learned articles for National Geographic Societies, and afterwards comments a rarey girl, aha, back to Abyssinia. And she was young, had black eyes, thick lips, hair curled, and breasts like polished brown with copper teeth, and ringlets on her arms, and joined her hands upon her central loin, and had shoulders as broad as Arthur's, and little ears, a girl of some caste in Bronzeville. Rimbaud also knew thin bone-hipped Polynesian, sorry for that, with long tumbling hair and tiny tits and big feet. Finally, he starts trading illegal guns in Tajura, riding in caravans, mad with a belt of gold around his waist, screwed by King Menelik, the Shah of Shoa. The noises of these names in that noisy French mind. Cairo for the summer, bitter lemon wind, and kisses in the dusty park where girls sit folded at dusk thinking nothing. Havar, Havar, by litter to Zayla is carried mourning his birthday. The boat returns to Choc, Castle, Marseille, sadder than time, than dream, sadder than water. Carcinoma, Rimbaud is eaten by the disease of overlife. They cut off his beautiful leg. He dies in the arms of Saint Isabel, his sister, and before rising to heaven, sends his franc to Jamie the Havary boy, his body servant, 8 years in the African Frenchman's hell. And it all adds up to nothing, like Dostoevsky, Beethoven, or Da Vinci. So, poets, rest a while and shut up. Nothing ever came of nothing. Jack Kerouac.
Beautiful. Merci, mon vieux pote.
You're very
Fantastic.
welcome.
That was terrific.
Imagine the knowledge of Jack Kerouac to understand Rimbaud so much and to tell a whole biographical story in a poem. What can you tell us about the color of verbs? It's kind of mentioned in the poem.
The color of vowels?
Of vowels, yes. I thought it was verbs, but yeah, sorry.
It's color of vowels, and it's a very cryptic poem by Rimbaud. And if you find an explanation or an interpretation of that, you're gonna have so many on internet, or in books, and they are all different. From just my humble point of view, and it's why finally everybody's like is crazy about Rimbaud. I think Rimbaud is like some kind of a Californian poet, French poet, because he wanted to embrace the world. He wanted to embrace. It's like for me like a spiritual guy, but stuck in his own century, and he wanted to do something that Gustave Flaubert always dreamed of. Gustave Flaubert said that he always dreamed to make a book who stand by itself, without without characters, without just the style. And Céline also did that. The style was his own obsession, and like any good writer, which I should say. And Rimbaud tried that. I mean, he was a master of Greek, he was a master in Latin, he was gifted by God, but he couldn't achieve what he wanted to achieve. And he tried, for me, the vowels, the color of vowels, it's like some jazz. It's like some, you let go, you write stuff and you've got images coming to the minds of the reader, and they're always different. Like I've got of course, Rimbaud's work, and I'm almost 50 years old now. So I read it several times in my life, and I always find something different because I'm different, So there's no true explanation. It's like the mood in which you are, you can listen to a jazz music that you like. And if it's sunny, if it's gloomy outside, if it's hazy, it's gonna take a different color. That's the beauty of the thing. So there's no true explanation. And I think it's after that, he couldn't achieve exactly what he wanted. He couldn't touch the pure style because you need words, you need something. And he just left, and that's part of the mystery. And that, he just left, and that's, nobody understand that. Like, why he's got everything and he just go into the world. I think it makes sense because at one point, I don't know if you're writing, if you're putting music, if you're writing music, poems, or you do movies, there's some piece of the world that you can't touch. You can't embrace totally with all your emotions. And sometimes maybe you just have to go on the road, like Kerouac said, to live truly with all your senses. And that's exactly what Rimbaud said. You have to, un dérèglement raisonnable des sens, meaning that you have to be kind of crazy, but in a rational way, you know? And maybe that's something that Kerouac liked, because he was always, and you know that better than me, intimately linked with the Tibetan spirituality and other things, like how you connect with the world. And Rimbaud got that. If you read all Rimbaud works, everything is there. This kind of passion for the untouchable, or, so there's no explanation. Long story short.
He had his own voice and he told his own story. And I think for people who may be tuning in or not paying attention, that extraordinary thing that you read was published in Human Magazine thanks to the person we're honoring this evening, Hetty Jones. She had the, as they say in the non-intellectual, non-French speaking world, the chutzpah, the nerve, the energy, the daring to print that, so the people in New York City on the Lower East Side who read comic books would have a chance to also see that there was something else out there that was almost even more interesting than Little Abner or Joe Palooka, which was the poetry of Rimbaud. And the great thing, when you mentioned Flaubert, we have to remember that F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was such a brilliant, perfect writer, wrote Thomas Wolfe, who was a big influence on Jack earlier on, who was more spontaneous, letting it all hang out. He wrote Thomas Wolfe a letter saying you have to be more concise, you have to be more economical. And Thomas Wolfe's famous comment was, Flaubert me, no Flauberts. In other words, he loved Flaubert. Everybody did. But he was a different kind of a voice, just as Rimbaud was, where he just had to speak his story. And I know some of the people besides Yasmin who are in the audience, if anybody is out there in the Zoom audience, you might want to ask James Canary or Monsieur Francois Marati something about what's up, or you can ask any of us about Hetty Jones, since she couldn't be here in person, and we'd be delighted to have you participate as well. Is anybody in the Zoom audience? Maybe no one tuned in tonight after New Year's with the stormy weather.
Well, I'd like to say one thing about Flaubert, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, Frank, but I read something once about how Flaubert liked to say things à haute voix, like in a very loud voice, so he could understand or feel if it was the truth.
Well, it's about music, it's about music. The great writer, if you read them out loud, it's almost a song. It's not just words. It's like the good directors in movie. Lots of directors work on the image, but sometimes they forget the sound, and the sound is very important. So the writers are the same. The sound for the writers is when they read out loud their words, and they need to, they need to go to the right direction.
That's why I'm so glad we're doing this audiobook with David, because we have his own words. The feeling of the time of the 50s and his friendship with Kerouac come through in a way that it wouldn't with somebody else reading.
On that note, Anthony, can you see if there's anybody in the Zoom audience, unless they tuned out completely? And if they are, you might want to ask a question, since a lot of people come every week and never get a chance to ask. I know Dr. Nelson Harrison's always there, Morley's there, and several other people, I think.
I'd love to say hello to Norton too.
Exactly. So is Anthony, is there anybody in the Zoom audience that you could see on your magical receiver?
Well, I have a question.
Yes, Morley Kamen, singer, who's been on, never got a chance to say anything all the times you've been on.
Oh, it's just a joy and a blessing to listen. And thank you for reading.
Thank you.
Really, merci beaucoup.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Maestro, Amram, you had said earlier today to always be an individual with a collective consciousness. I wrote it down. I thought it was so powerful. And I was wondering if your guests or if James or if you would like to comment on that and how, um, music has informed that view, or how silence has informed that view, or how poetry or Kerouac has informed that view. Always be an individual. Always be an individual with a collective consciousness. That's such a great thing to say, and it's now in my iPhone forever.
Right. I forgot that I said it, but I agree totally.
I just feel like that's something you geniuses on this line could all extrapolate on.
Well, Jim, why don't you comment? Because you studied Buddhism all your life, in addition to being such a great librarian and a conservator of Jack's heritage. Maybe you could talk about that because you're more qualified than I would ever be.
Even though you're the one who said it, but go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Um, well, yeah, I think that's a kind of a thing that comes up every time when you sit down to meditate. I mean, Buddhists have a feeling of non-self. You let go of these restrictive ideas of what self is and become open to your collective consciousness there, and it's always out there. And so I feel that's wonderful. It's almost like it was taken from Jack. I bet, David, that was just fantastic, and I'm glad you brought it back up so it could be reminded. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Well, that's what I learned from all the great jazz masters and the great classical European masters, those refugees that came over and brought the real deal of what that European music was about, which was not the head waiter versus the busboy. I was a second busboy. I was never a head waiter, but I was experienced the restaurant politics as a teenage second busboy, and it was a drag. But I saw that art is a step above that, because there's the second violin section at the very back is just as important as the conductor or the composer. Everybody is in the band, everybody's part of the whole, and we're all servants to a higher power. And the collective thing is what people can do together stronger than what one person can do by themselves. That's why staring in the mirror and being a narcissistic swine is bad for the health and a drag to be around, because full greed ahead is not that rewarding in the long run. It's bad for your health. And if you can try to think about others and feel you're part of with and for others, you have a better time. And it's not that hard. You just have to be aware that it's possible. And secondly, try to do it. Even if you're told by career counselors, you'll be considered to be a loser if you don't grab everything and take the money out of town before you get caught.
My son was studying jazz here at Indiana University, and his second major was psychology. And he was in psychology. He was very interested in that concept of personal space. And some people are their personal space is very tight, and some are more fluid. But he said in jazz, you have to be able to permeate and go through that. And that's what he loved, that relationship.
Absolutely.
I have another take on it.
Oh, great.
Back in 2009, David put a trio together with Freddie Redd and Larry Ridley. And we went out and performed at the International Society for Improvised Music, a convention out at UC Santa Cruz. I think you might know Ed Sarath, who was the head of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We were the only trio that even played the blues. Okay. but I was on a panel on a Friday night with sitting beside George Lewis from Columbia. And we were in the amphitheater. And when it came to me, I said to the audience, there were about 200 people there. I said, how many of you live life exactly the way you planned it? And of course, nobody raised their hand, right? I said, so what are you doing? You're improvising. Improvisation is our natural state. Right. It's not a subject that we try to reach out and grab and connect to. It's who we are. But we've been duped into thinking we're some kind of structured intellectual kind of thing, which isn't what we are at all. But we've been, I guess, conditioned to not think of ourselves as the baby would think of themselves. They just are. Or as an animal, they're not self-conscious like we are. So this restrictive consciousness that we are conditioned into, especially if you have some schooling, is what we're trying to fight against, because we forgot who we are. So improvisation is just being. And if you want to document it, sometimes it's hard to document it in a way with a pen and ink as it is to have somebody else record it. But what we're doing here now, I mean, I'm loving this book you're reading, David, because you're reading your own words in the voices and all that, and that's totally knocking me out, you know, because it feels like you're there. But we have such an attempt to try to prove ourselves to some mythical intellectual consciousness, which really doesn't exist, and it's not enough of an impetus to get us up out of bed. It's the art that makes you get up out of bed every day, and the more spontaneous it is, the better we like it. So I just want to.
I think, you know, the thing of the spontaneous and the formal, all the formal stuff, that helps you to get trained so you can figure having it have some kind of form, and then from there you just go with the flow, as they say. And if you're writing it down, as you know from the composing, aside from being a great jazz trombone player and improviser, the when you're writing it down, then you get a chance to use the greatest invention of the 20th century, the eraser and the wastebasket, and you get a second chance. Then you get 37 chances, and if you're not sure what to do, then you stumble and fumble, and you end up choosing what feels right. And then you look at the whole thing and say, wait a minute, is this saying anything? Does it feel natural? And the best you can do is to make something down on paper that feels like you're telling a story and feels like you're playing. So when you hear Vivaldi, Mozart, and Bach, it sounds like they're just jamming right out of their head. And Chopin was a famous improviser, made his living as a party piano player, and apparently, from reading his letters, it was very hard for him to write piano music. Man, none of us were around to hear him play at those salons, but wow, what he wrote down on the paper was perfect. And I think part of the reason was because he could play it and play as well as write. And all the great Europeans were improvisers, and jazz reminds us all how important improvising is, and that everybody's creative, and therefore musicians who play off the paper are not interpreters, which is a way of society putting them on a lower echelon than the creators, who by definition are on the echelon of the starving artist, victim, infantile, die in the gutter, but at least they're given that little, you know, live fast, die young, and be miserable.
As Oscar Wilde would say, some of them were looking at the stars from the gutter.
Exactly. And
David, can we go to a socially conscious individual, Norton Wisdom, and say hello before we run out of time? You and Nelson, thank you.
Hi, Pamela. Hey, David. Hey, Troop. How you guys doing?
Hey, Norton. So good to see you.
Can you hear me? Well, all I can say about the universality is great to hide behind the masses. I mean, I'm so embarrassed by what I do is that I can just go, it's their fault, not mine. So it's a tool that you can use to survive when you realize the folly of our individuality. So today I was the first day of my new studio on 6th and Main, which is right down in Skid Row, right in the middle of the homeless in LA. I was thinking about how great it is. How could you be an artist and not be in the thick of it all, right? Because you can just steal energy from humanity. You're like a vampire. So I'm not quite sure that it's quite a noble thing to be universal. I think it's more vampirish. And of course, you're the French to say that they're rational. I'm not buying it. I mean, one of the most important persons in when I was at Berkeley was Guy Debord in the Situationalists, and that was all as I understand it, about being in the now and what was going on in France in the 50s. So I just have to throw that in and make a fool of myself. But good to be here. And also,
can you tell, because you're such a wild man, can you please tell us about how you risked your life going to Berlin to paint the wall? You're going all staticky, Norton. Oh,
stupidity. That's another in the United States to save my life. Matter of fact, I didn't even want one because what we were doing in Vietnam to our fellow men, so I didn't want a show. And then I found out I couldn't get one, so it worked out well. But all of a sudden, there was a lot of interest in Germany in my paintings because they look like beach balls, and Germany is overcast most of the year, so these bright primary colors saved them from their gray world. And I was in '81. I was in Munich at an exhibition with Hans Naumuth, I think is a friend of Dave's. It was a friend of Dave's who passed away. And I was at the dinner party afterwards because Dave always talks about the dinner party after shows. I was having dinner with the German filmmaker. Let's see, I can't remember his name, and a great sculptor, and we just and Reagan was going to save Germany by neutron bombing them, and at that time there was 300,000 people Germans were marching on Bonn to protest Reagan's bombing, or his idea of bombing. So we decided that we'd do a project. We wouldn't want to go back to our ivory towers, and we'd go to Berlin and paint on the wall. This was '81, and nobody thought anybody would. They never, the idea of the wall coming down was just inconceivable. And dinner party fell apart. We got into a big fight, and I decided to go to Berlin by myself. And at that time, you couldn't touch the wall. It was sort of the cash cow of capitalism, saying, "Well, look at the Soviet Union that doesn't allow people to escape, and there's freedoms on this side and slavery is on the other side." Anyway, it was a big symbol of Western Western civilization and the freedom. Anyway, so I had to jump over the wall and paint in East Germany, and I painted a mural that was 150 meters long. And once I jumped over, I couldn't jump back into West Germany, so I had to stay there for 3 days and finish this mural. And then when I jumped back over into the west side, I was arrested for leaving West Germany without a visa and yada yada yada. And I was a surfer. I'm a surfer, so I didn't think anything seriously would come of it as far as danger. So, but that year they shot 500 people fucking with the wall in Berlin. So whatever that all craziness means. But anyway, enough is enough. Thank you, though, for letting me be part of this.
Thank you, Norton. You're a serious dude, man, and I love you dearly. And you could be so irreverent, but you're a serious human soul thinking about social consciousness and painting it every day. Thank you so much.
I embarrassed myself too much already. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Well, I guess we have 2 minutes left. So I guess we just want to, in order not to go overtime and lose our Zoom account, we want to thank Pamela for your wonderful creativity and thinking of doing this show, to the producer, the brilliant Mr. Anthony Demarbiex, to our special guest, François Merapti, who was so nice to come and give us Rimbaud and give us the beautiful readings of our special guest of honor, whom I'm sure you will remember, Hetty Jones, wonderful poet, writer, teacher, and we hope she can come back on live when things clear up in the atmosphere, which I'm sure they will. And also, of course, Norbert Wisdom, who's such a terrific artist, Norbert Wisdom, and also the wonderful guest we had, Dr. Nelson Harrison, the keeper of the flame of jazz, not only in Pittsburgh, but in the world. Morley Kamen, a wonderful singer-songwriter, and her husband, Chris, and all of the people who've come in, and hope that you will read, write, Be creative. So this is something for Hetty and for all of you until we see you next week. And enjoy the new year. Stay healthy. Don't watch TV news too much, and don't get depressed because better days are yet to come. We have no place to go in 2021 then up, so we're on the way.
Are you going to play us out, Davey?
Sure.
Thank you so much, Frank and Jim Canary and everyone for showing up with us, and wishing you all a beautiful 2021. That was brilliant, Frank. C'est mon héros.
Happy New Year, you all. We'll see you before next fall. Until the time, we're glad that we could be with you and have us all go back to school. And remember, there's nothing worse than an overeducated fool. And thank you, Hetty Jones, for being our guest tonight. And
Thank you, Hetty. I love you.
Stay creative.